There we go. I think that worked. Welcome everybody to another episode of our Puget Systems podcast. Yeah, what a man! This is gonna be cool. We got Matt Bach, our internal expert on like content creation software, everything from Premiere and DaVinci Resolve to After Effects and all the other good stuff in between. So it's been a little bit, I think, since before the new year. And
Yeah.
a lot has happened. We have had CPU launches, we've had software updates, we got a lot, the big shakeups all around. So I think we got quite a bit to talk about this week, huh?
Yeah. Oh, this week, man, it's been like you said, it's been months.
Yeah, yeah. I'm still really shocked at how well the 12th gen Intel stuff did. Like that was good for them.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, and we still have room to grow. Because I mean, the 12th didn't launch. We're all still on DDR4, and
Mhm.
DDR5 is still to come. And I forget what we saw. It was like
It was pretty.
10% performance gain with
Mhm.
DDR5. It's just we gotta wait till it exists.
Right.
I mean, it exists, but we gotta wait until supply
Somewhere.
is consistent. Wait until motherboards are out that have good features.
Yeah.
Because especially with like a change in memory, like it's kind of awkward, I bet, for like Gigabyte and Asus and all those guys, because now they
Mhm.
have to like double their product line because they have to have
Ugh.
DDR4 boards and then DDR5, and for
Mhm.
whatever reason, it seems like they never just like make the same board twice. Like they do sometimes,
Right.
but
Hmm.
I don't know why. It feels like for the boards we like, it's like, okay, yeah, we want Thunderbolt, we want 10G networking. Oh, that's only available on DDR4. Okay, well, we gotta
Right.
wait till they make one on DDR5.
Huh. I wonder like what really goes into the. I'm sure there's an enormous amount of engineering things to consider down
Oh yeah.
that small and stuff. You can't just like, oh, we'll just put a different chipset in there and it's fine. But like, how much of a difference is it really?
Yeah, who knows? It could also be, I mean, every company, every person's going to have limited amount of bandwidth of what they can do. So it
Hmm.
could just mean that they made a decision of like, okay, hey, we're going to worry about these boards for DDR5, but since we know supply is going to be short, there's no reason to make our full product lineup, so we're just going to make the ones that we think are going to be the most popular. I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Plus,
probably something like that.
with everything else, supply chain stuff, and back at manufacturing time and space being pre-ordered and years ahead of time, and I imagine it's just it's a
Yeah.
lot of chaos.
Yeah, it was funny. I saw on, I think maybe it was Reddit or Twitter or something. Someone just built like a 12th gen system, but they couldn't get a GPU, so they're using a GeForce 980. Was that even
Okay.
GeForce back then? I think it was, but I don't think
No.
it's GTX. It was before GTX, I'm pretty sure. But
Okay.
like the old 980, where like the cards have like a picture of some like cartoon
Oh
character or
yeah.
anime kind of thing on
Oh
it.
man.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like a 12-year-old card. And you're like, oh my goodness, that's a little unbalanced.
Right. Yeah. Or I've seen people buying up Quadros that are
Hmm.
Titan equivalent and stuff from but previous gen Kepler status and whatnot. It's 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 chaos out there and people doing all kinds of weird stuff. So
Yeah, I'm still very thankful that at least for our workstations we're weathering it and it seems to be okay. I mean, the fact that we don't have to buy through retail sure helps a lot because then we don't get price gouged as much. We just have to make sure our supply lines are good and
right.
we pay our bills on time and everything.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So, where do you want to start? What are you most excited about? Things that you've changed because you just put
Oh
out
man.
your local an update to your local storage suggestions on how Premiere
Hmm.
Pro and After Effects should be set up, as far as like what files go where on what hard drives. You did a recent look at DPX footage, which that was new and exciting for me. Yeah. So, where do you want to start?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we can just tackle through those one at a time. I
Sure.
mean, the storage thing, honestly, nothing's really changed. Like it was years, 5 or 6 years ago or something. Like we put out an article about how to configure storage for Premiere Pro
Mhm.
and After Effects. It might have been both. I don't remember even. And I think we even made a little terrible video to go along with it. And but yeah, like nothing's really changed. Like like things have gotten
Okay.
faster.
Right.
NVMe drives have gotten cheaper and more reliable. So like we're starting to use them more and more. But as far as like what you should do, it's really the same thing. Like move your cache to its own drive if you can.
Okay.
Uh, Keep your OS and applications on a fast drive, usually an SSD. Or now we're starting to just do NVMe's more and more
Mhm.
because they're not that much more expensive. And then like, hey, yeah, everything else is like, well, what kind of videos are you working with? What's your assets? Because if it's giant, huge bit rate like DPX, like you mentioned, well, that's going to have to go on an NVMe. If it's like H.264, whatever. Like, you should put it on an SSD, but like technically you could do hard drive if you really wanted to. I wouldn't.
Right.
But then it's like, oh yeah, are your projects like 1 terabyte? Are they 8 terabytes? 20 terabytes?
Yeah.
How big is it? And then
Right.
that just determines your storage. So that's the hard thing with storage. Like you can give like some best practices, dedicated cache drive. But beyond that, then it just starts to devolve into, well, what are you doing?
Right. Because that is something we've gotten a lot of questions on since that article and that video had come out. It's like, hey, I have this now. What if I only have one or two drives and that sort of thing? Like, how is it any different? And so it's nice to have a little something to turn back to.
Yeah, well, just it's been so old. So many people look at that old article and be like, "Well, there's no way it can still be right." And
Right.
it's like, nope, it's still the same thing.
It's kind of like platter drives are less of a talking point, I guess, unless you're dealing with huge
Yeah,
file sizes.
I mean, in some ways, I feel like platter drives are just as important probably actually now, but it's not because of internal storage. It's because of like NAS units. It sure
Right.
seems like I don't know if it's just we're dealing with less mid-range prosumers or whatever and more high-end studios or what, but it sure feels like NAS units are becoming more and more popular, even
Oh,
for
sure.
someone who's just a one-man band, you're just doing their own thing by themselves. It sure feels like NAS units are gaining in popularity, and that's where you're going to need a lot of storage. And like, man, if you do that with SSDs, it's going to be really expensive.
Very.
So
Yeah.
most people are going to be, doing, an array of platter drives. But a lot of them do have like SSD cache, which is
Sure.
kind of nice. I don't know how much it actually helps. If you've got a 1 terabyte cache drive, but then you're working on a project with 4 terabytes of footage, like,
Oh.
yeah, that cache drive's probably not going to be doing much. Because nothing's really being read often enough to be cached.
Sure.
But
Sure.
it still helps.
So is that kind of an important consideration then for your cache drive to be bigger than the projects you're working on?
No, usually cache is a lot smaller than your project because
Oh,
it caches things like waveforms. In Premiere Pro, you see the audio, the waveforms. Those things are
right.
stored as cache files,
Okay.
or just where things are. Like you have in your project, okay, I have this video, video1.mp4 or whatever. But where
Mhm.
does that live on your system? And like Premiere Pro could go and find it every single time, but what it uses is cache files, a media database of like this lives there, so it never has to figure it out every time. It's just yep, it's there.
That's where you get those errors where it's like, hey, I'm trying to find this clip that was in this project. It's not there anymore, and you can kind of repoint it to where it's hiding. That's kind of
Yeah, it could be. I mean, you generally, if you're running into problems with like media being not found and stuff, and like it's there, it's probably a corrupt cache database.
okay.
And like Premiere Pro, again, it can figure all this stuff out, again. So that's why like clearing cache is very important, and why. Here, I'll even bring it up in Premiere Pro. Yeah, they've recently, well, not even. It's been a couple of years now. They've added a media cache management system.
Nice.
I don't know if you know. See, I should have made my screen 1080p before the stream, so it'd be a little
No
bit
worries.
bigger. But so you can have things like automatically delete after 90 days, or automatically delete when it's gotten to a certain size, and that's terrific because man, cache stuff like you don't. It makes things go faster and smoother in Premiere Pro while you're working, but it's nothing that can't be replaced.
Sure.
Usually if you've got even a pretty decent sized project, like okay, maybe it'll take a few extra seconds, maybe even like a minute to load. Next time you launch Premiere Pro, but like that's a one time thing, and now who knows what bugs it's gotten rid of because
Right.
it always feels like first troubleshooting step with anything with like Premiere Pro, After Effects, DaVinci Resolve, Photoshop, anything like that is clear your cache. Clear your cache and clear your preferences.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good.
Yeah, and actually, I should have this set up. I don't know why I don't have this set up. I should do it right now. Probably because I clear my preferences for troubleshooting of like
Right.
different random things constantly.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, that's cool. So what are you working on in here anyway? This looks like
Oh,
what you had just posted recently on Twitter about the remix thing.
yeah. So, in addition to like all the hardware stuff that we're always doing, we always keep up on software and like what is Adobe doing. And I think did I have a tab? I did. Yeah, they just did a new update a couple of days ago of the 22.2, and man, it's a
Okay.
good update. Like there's been a lot of really good things that Adobe's been doing recently. Like After Effects, I mean, we've talked about it a ton. A few
Oh
months ago, multi-frame rendering and composition profiler and all that fun stuff.
yeah.
But this update in Premiere is pretty decent. They made a speech to text way faster, so apparently it's 3 times faster. I mean, I don't do that, but
Ooh,
like
right.
auto captions is amazing. Like
Yes.
I've heard more and more that people are even just like editing to the text, like captions,
Mm-hmm.
because in Premiere Pro, I don't have a good example of this. Like it'll put, come back up here. Like it'll give you, up in here, you can have your captions, and it'll separate it up by like paragraph or like sentence and stuff. And so a lot of people are even like just using that to navigate their timeline. It's like, oh, that's
Oh,
there. Oh, they stopped. I can see that they stopped and like repeated something, and I can see they halted. So you don't have to look at a waveform. You can actually just see the text, and like it's not perfect, but if it generates really fast and they just made it
yeah,
3 times faster, like
that's
that's just
clever.
yet another tool.
I like that. I noticed it mentioned that it's local. It's being done on device now. Because when I was
Yeah,
playing with
you can.
the transcription, it's sends it off and then comes back, and that can take a few minutes. It wasn't anything horrible, but um,
Yeah,
I imagine
but
that's
yeah, now you can
really
do it
where
on
that's coming up.
device.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, and a lot of this stuff, I feel it's kind of like proxies where it doesn't have to stop your workflow as you're like getting started in a project. You dragged in all of your different camera shots from a talking head interview, or a single recording from a Zoom or
Right.
StreamYard or whatever. You can just start it generating captions right away while you're doing all your other setup, because there's always a
Hmm.
bunch of setup you got to do when you start a project. And if that's just another tool you can use for editing, like that's great. Now you can edit to you can edit to the waveform, to the audio, you can edit to the video, and now you can edit to captions. Like that's great, especially for
Oh,
these talking heads that are now so popular with
yeah.
Zoom and the pandemic and everything. That's wonderful. And then you can just turn around and use it for because what is it we've talked about, like putting the captions, like the text of any like interviews, like on a page,
Oh, right. Yeah.
so
The
that
transcript.
so like
Yeah.
yeah, so that Google can crawl it and
Hmm.
find everything. Because I mean, videos are wonderful, but they're not that great for SEO, search engine
Right.
optimizations. Like it's hard sometimes to find the right video, but if all the caption is there, oh, now you can search by that. Google can use that.
I've seen that quite a bit, especially like on news sites and stuff. They'll where they're interviewing somebody or whatnot. The video will be up top, and then the whole transcription will be below for that reason. And it's really nice sometimes
Yeah,
because
I've seen
sometimes.
that in some like tutorials and stuff too, like training materials.
Mhm.
Because that is wonderful. Because me, oftentimes, like I don't want to watch a video of someone just like talking about how they set something up. Like, no, I'm just gonna like skim through the text and like, okay, that's the part I need to know, and then watch
Yeah,
the video for the useful parts.
yeah,
To me.
yeah. No, I like it. It's like the recipes, right? You go to a recipe and it's like a whole blog post before you get to just the list of ingredients. It's like that's all I want. It's just give me to
Yeah.
the important bits. Yeah,
And if
yeah,
that's all video, well, now you got to skip around and hope you can find where it is where they talk about the ingredients. But if it's
yeah.
text, you can skim a lot easier. At
I
least
like
me. I mean, I know everyone ingests different content different, but
it.
getting more different ways for people to interact with content, I think, is always good.
I agree. Absolutely. And yeah, and I have to say, even I haven't played with it since this recent update, but the transcription thing is pretty powerful, and I think a little better than YouTube's attempt at their like auto caption thing. Um, it's pretty good, and I imagine only as time goes on, it gets better and better and better because Adobe Sensei AI stuff is just. I imagine it's all of this is wrapped up in that same ball of
Yeah,
machine learning.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. A lot of these things are, and man, yeah, it's cool because, like you said, it's just going to get better, and the more people use it and like make corrections in their own. I'm not sure how it works between like stuff going back to Adobe to like train their models. I don't know, but I would imagine that the more people use it, the smarter it's going to be.
I think so.
Who knows how they do it? They might. I mean, I'm sure like YouTube, they train on their own stuff. You know, if someone fixes captions, then
Hmm.
it uses that as a training model. Adobe, I don't know if they like. I doubt they send back your data of like your audio and then your text that you corrected. I doubt it. That seems like a
I would be surprised if it was like the raw, like here's all of my audio, like the file itself kind of thing.
yeah,
But I mean, there's got to be some kind of learning data that goes back and forth. I would think,
yeah,
or
yeah. You're right. There's got to be ways they can do it safely.
yeah, yeah,
But
must.
but yeah. So like, there's that stuff. What else did they add?
Hmm.
Um, Faster exports. I think they added a bunch of hardware encoding options. And man, some of
Oh,
the
that's
performance
right.
that they put in is like, I'll make it decent size, is insane. What they're saying. So this is exporting to HEVC, and it's just the new version of Premiere versus the previous. And
Hmm.
man, like some of these things, like I never trust first party performance things ever. I don't care if it's Adobe, I don't care if it's Intel, AMD, anybody.
Yeah,
But even if it's like half that, that's insane.
yeah.
Like that's amazing. So it's probably, I don't think they go super deep into it, but it's probably just they added hardware encoding support for this 10-bit 420, and that's the
Oh,
kind of gains you get because of hardware encoding and decoding. But like, good, good. I'm glad they did it because like 10 bits
right.
becoming more popular even as an export because of all the HDR stuff.
Okay.
And so if like better performance gains is always good. I mean, the other
And
thing too with like HEVC, it feels like so many people aren't using it yet. Like so many people are still exporting to H.264 and uploading that to YouTube.
wow.
When like HEVC, it's like half the size, same
Yeah.
quality at half the size. That's wonderful. Or it can be twice the quality at the same size. Well, not exactly, but it can be roughly. And
Huh.
so like, man, people need to use HEVC more. Like, come
Yeah.
on, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uncle Matt
even
has
like
spoken.
a yeah, use HEVC, do it. And once you finally do, then we'll probably be moved on to what is it, VP9 or AV1 or
Oh,
whatever those other ones
yeah.
are.
I've heard that kicked around for quite a bit. Like Google, I remember, like on their something about their cloud service is like built from the core to handle the AV1. I think is what it was. It's for YouTube. Like behind the scenes, when they process your videos, their machines are running it through that algorithm or codec. I'm unsure of the proper
Yeah, it's
vocabulary.
supposed to be really good
Yeah,
as far as like
yeah.
quality and size and everything. But I always feel like the things that are going to determine what people use in like post production is going to be what do cameras record to.
Right.
I've never heard of a camera that records to VP9, so I feel like all these editors and colors and whatever, like they don't know it, so they're
Mhm.
not going to use it.
Okay.
Um, it's probably similar to like how so many deliverables require ProRes when like DNX is just as good, but
Just
they don't
familiarity.
they don't know it, so they're just going to require ProRes. No one's ever going to be fired for delivering ProRes.
Right on. Yeah. Ah. So back to that exporting thing. Is that I noticed that the hardware specs that they had mentioned there was a Xeon something
Oh,
2.1 gigahertz, and forgive my ignorance. That has nothing to do with QuickSync, right? Because I know in our look at hardware decoding, I think it was the
mhm.
articles for that. If you've got Intel with QuickSync, you can handle anything, and it's tremendous. It's amazing. It's great. This I think is independent from
I
that.
think they were showing they've got two here. One is using NVIDIA, I imagine, and one is using Intel
Okay.
QuickSync
Yeah, because it says there that
because
Iris Xe thing. I think is there. That's like a laptop built-in.
yeah, that's yeah
Graphics card.
Intel graphics in the
Oh,
laptop.
that's amazing.
But so yeah, this one's got to be QuickSync. This one's got to be using NVIDIA. I don't know why they didn't actually like say. Well, they kind of say it up here, Intel or NVIDIA GPUs. So that they
Okay.
kind of say it, but yeah, it's kind of weird because like I mean, who even knows what this Xeon is? Just Intel Xeon 2.1 gigahertz. All right, what is that?
Yeah, which one?
Is
Right.
it? Yeah, does it have QuickSync? Like, are you actually showing QuickSync here? Also, how old is that? Because
Yeah.
like this CPU is definitely not modern. RTX 5000, that's a gen old now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm always amazed at how much like a giant company like Adobe, they're still doing like developments and or like these kind of charts are on a gen old or more gen old. But I mean, on the other hand, that's probably what most Adobe users are. They're not going to be current gen; they're going to be a gen old or two. So it maybe is actually more relevant.
Yeah, that makes sense. We got a comment, and this kind of interesting. Stephen Barton on YouTube says sometimes people send us HEVC footage to edit, and it's been a nightmare. I haven't tried it with Premiere 2022 yet, though.
Yeah, usually the problem with HEVC and H.264, I mean, they're kind of the same problems. Is there's so many, all the different variations. So here, let me. Is our website still
8-bit, 10-bit, 420, 422,
Yeah.
444, all those flavors. The rainbow, the menagerie of
Um,
and you've mentioned before that to edit. So to clarify, H.264, H.265, these are the codecs, right? Right word, codec.
yes. Yep.
That like your cell phone records in. They're very small, pretty high quality, good compression algorithm for the video. They are not meant for editing. You've said this a lot. You've drilled on this a lot. They're not designed to be edited with. And I think a big part of that is you've mentioned because of variable frame rate, right? That's kind of a big issue with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And because, like you said, like they're considered a deliverable codec. I mean, a lot of these definitions are, you know, open to interpretation. Let's say, but I always call them a deliverable codec. Like it's whenever you're delivering something, so like from a camera or from your cell phone, that's delivering footage, or you're exporting out of Premiere Pro, that's deliverable because it's like you said, it's great quality in a really small file size. But yeah, processing that is a huge pain in the butt. And so, we'll bring this up. So we have one of our articles is like what kind of hardware you need to handle different flavors of them, because you've got the bit depth, the color bit depth, you've got the chroma subsampling, that's the 420, 422, 444 kind of a thing. And until very recently, it was really just the H.264 that we really had in Premiere Pro, and it was only 8-bit 420. That was it. Until like a year or two ago, GPUs weren't even used for it, so it was just if you had Intel QuickSync. That was it. And then a year or two ago, they added GPU decoding, so anything that GPU could handle could be used by Premiere Pro, and that's kind of we got HEVC now being supported, but even today, it's just 8-bit 420, 10-bit 420, and if you have a 11th or 12th gen Intel CPU with QuickSync, then you can do 10-bit 422. But anything else is going to be awful. It's going to be absolutely garbage. And so you really need to make sure that what you're working with in Premiere Pro is one of these variations. And there's some very common ones that we get a lot, like 8-bit 422 or 10-bit 422 is one we have customers ask us about quite a bit with H.264. There's a lot of like Canons and Sony, especially like DSLRs that will shoot that. And we just have to tell them like, yeah, it's going to be crap. Like your solution is either hope that you can do 10-bit 420 HEVC, which a lot of cameras actually could, or if you can do 10-bit 422, then you just need an Intel CPU with QuickSync and it'll be able to handle it. But anything else, it's going to be absolute garbage, and there's just nothing you can do about it. The solution is proxies. And you don't have to go to giant proxies. I feel like the go-to with proxies, the answer is always ProRes, ProRes LT, ProRes proxy, but like those things are massive. But you can get away with doing like a HEVC or H.264 8-bit 420 proxy. That's fine. As long as you have hardware decoding support for it, like it's not going to be as good as like ProRes, but if you're limited on space, it can do the job. Especially if you down the resolution, down the bit rate. But something else to note though is DaVinci Resolve takes a kind of a different approach. So Adobe, it feels like, I mean, this isn't like first-hand information, to take it with a grain of salt, but it feels to me like they're focusing on the most common codecs, like the ones that are going to have the biggest benefit, and then after that, then they're skipping over to the speech-to-text transcription stuff, the remix stuff, all that kind of stuff. Whereas DaVinci Resolve kind of goes the other way. Like they don't have as many fancy features, I feel, as like Premiere. But when it
Mhm.
comes to like hardware decoding, they add in whatever they can,
Yes.
which for H.264 isn't much. It's still just going to be 8-bit 420.
Okay.
And that is because there's just not hardware level support. Like AMD, NVIDIA, Intel, none of them have added anything other than 8-bit 420. And I highly expect they never will. I think a lot of them kind of view it as a legacy codec
Right.
where it's been replaced by HEVC already, and VP9 is now the thing that's on the forefront. You know, whether you define it as a legacy codec or not, I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, it's not the most modern codec, but there's still like billions of, well, maybe not billions, millions of people shooting with H.264 out there. It's still the
Right.
most common codec we ever hear about.
Yeah.
So it's kind of disappointing that, like, yeah, 8-bit 422, like, yeah, no, that's always going to be terrible, and there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
But
It's
at
like
least,
it seems like it's the DDR4, DDR5 kind of problem. Like everybody has DDR4 because like it's been 8 years or something of everybody rocking on it,
mhm.
and it's the same kind of deal. Like the original GoPro and everything since has been H.264, and now we're only just now kind of in the last couple of years getting H.265. So it's like, where do we want to put the focus on supporting the what is an older stuff, or do we want to really double down on the future?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the thing to note here, though, is how much more DaVinci Resolve adds support. I mean, they've got 10-bit 420 across the board, not just on Intel. That there's some 8-bit 444 support in there. The cool thing is seeing that like Intel is like gung ho on adding support. I don't know if that was like in response to seeing that now GPUs are starting to do things, so they had to add an additional value add. So they just went, doubled down on adding more support. Because going from 10th gen to 11th gen, like they added so much more support in 11th gen.
Yeah.
So all that to come back to the original thing about HEVC footage is it's probably not a format that has hardware decoding support in Premiere Pro. And if you do it a ton, well, you might want to take a peek over at DaVinci Resolve. Even if you don't use it for absolutely everything, I do know several people who use DaVinci Resolve just for generating proxies
Oh,
because they can
interesting.
decode that HEVC faster. In Windows, you can't do a ProRes proxy, then you'd have to use like a DNX, but you
Mhm.
can use that for it. The only downside is, well, you need these. What do you still? I was going to say you need the studio version to get hardware acceleration or hardware decoding support in Resolve, but I think they're starting to add to the free version even some hardware decoding support. So you
Mhm.
might not even need the full paid version. So
Cool.
yeah, it's kind of a mess. H.264, all those long GOP or intraframe. I always mix the two up. Long GOP codecs are just always going to be a mess. And
Yeah.
yeah, I wish there was like a standard people could like arrive to, but there's just so many different things that people can do. It's like
Mhm.
H.264 and HEVC are by far like the most like customizable codec out there. Like ProRes, you have what, like 6 or 8 different presets, and then it's resolution, and that's it.
Cool.
Whereas H.264 and H.265, there's dozens.
Huh. You mentioned a couple times about how we see different footages and stuff. There's something we don't talk about often enough that, or at all really. People can hire you guys in a sense, or we test. People. How do I put this? Customers and stuff will come to us and say, "Hey, like, how much better is this really going to be?" They send us test footage and things like that. That helps to inform like where things are going, right? Like, can you expand on that?
Yeah, so the problem with video editing, and I'm sure this comes into in other industries as well, is there are so many workflows and variations. Like, I mean, we're just talking about H.264, but you've also got all the flavors of ProRes, and then you got like all the different like red codecs and all the different compressions and resolutions and Blackmagic RAW, and I've got like ProRes RAW that no one uses, but I'm sure there's one or two people out there. Um, and then you get up to like the really high end stuff like RA RAW or Cinema DNG. And the hard part is, I mean, we do a lot of testing. We
Mhm.
have our own homebrew. Well, it's not really homebrew at this point, but our own in-house benchmark that we've made. But even in like a benchmark, we can only test a handful of different codecs when there's in reality hundreds or even thousands of variations.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you're saying, one of the things we do is we ask our customers to send us either a project or just a few sample clips, and we can test on, okay, what is it actually going to be with your project. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with like the whole payment side of it. I know some things we can comp, some things, if you're not buying a workstation from us, or if it's a much bigger project, we have to, ask for payment for our time, just like, an editor has to ask for payment for their time.
Right.
But then we can dive in and we can really figure out exactly the right thing. And, honestly, it feels like a lot of the time it ends up saving the customer money because a lot of these codecs are worse than you think. Like, we'll look at,
what do you mean worse? Like in terms of
worse at like utilizing like your system hardware. So like processing it. So something like we did that testing recently on DPX.
Yes.
I put an article. So a customer sent us some DPX files because they wanted to be able to edit it in DaVinci Resolve was what they were looking at. And, I got into it and I'm like, man, this is super interesting. So I expanded it out. I did some extra testing, not just on their clip because I gave them their answer, right away of how it performed on a couple different systems, and that helped them inform them. I think in that case it was, no, don't buy the more expensive CPU, buy the cheaper one because it's faster. So again, like even though I think they had to pay us, for that testing, they ended up saving money because it was the exact right thing, not, something that we're making our educated guess on. But again, there's thousands of variations. We can't know everything.
Yeah.
But this thing, I got into it, and there's some really interesting things. First of all, these things are massive files. So I just threw up like some sample like bit rates and stuff, and 1080p, lowest end is generally going to be around 200 megabits a second. That's like 4 times higher than like 4K ProRes. And then you get all the way up. If someone was happening to do 8K 16-bit, which, I mean, you're getting into like Hollywood level stuff, like it totally could be. You're talking about like making Marvel movies and doing VFX for Marvel. I don't know what codec they're using, but it might be something like this. Sure. That's 4.5 gigabytes a second, not gigabit, gigabytes per second. So like an hour of footage is 16 terabytes. Like, yeah, okay, that's pretty big. So I think in this case, the bigger thing for this customer wasn't actually even the CPU. It was, you need bigger storage and faster storage because it doesn't matter how fast your CPU is if your storage can't keep up.
Right.
But so in this article, we talked about that basically. Primary is storage speed, and then how much power do you need. It was also really interesting to see that DaVinci Resolve was amazing for it. Like CPU load, that's here for like a couple of different formats, and at most it was 4% overall, 20% on a single core, and like that was it. Whereas Premiere Pro, we hit 40% total, but it was spread out across all cores at 8K 10-bit, and we were starting to drop some frames, and we got up to the really top end, and we were at 100%, and we were only getting 5 FPS instead of the 23.976, 24 FPS. So the other really interesting thing about this was, man, yeah, you should be using DaVinci Resolve if you're going to have to be working with DPX because 20% on a single core, 4% overall is a whole heck of a lot better than 100%, and you're dropping 3/4 of the frames.
Right.
So, yeah, when you get down to individual codecs, it just sometimes you don't know how these ones that are not as mainstream are going to behave.
Right. Wow. Dang, that's pretty cool. Man, it seems, and not to rag on Adobe at all, but it seems like Resolve, not better necessarily, but they seem to be focused on like more professional workflows. It seems like with being able to handle all these different flavors of HEVC, and then we saw this crazy DPX codec being handled like a champion.
I'd say it's just different. I mean, because some of it is like, okay, how does a program handle footage? And like in some areas, like you mentioned, like HEVC, DaVinci is definitely ahead. DPX is definitely ahead. But then you get into things like ProRes, and it's like, yeah, they're probably about the same. Like ProRes is so easy to edit. Like honestly, I don't care if DaVinci Resolve can edit ProRes technically twice as fast because like Premiere is going to be able to do 9 multicam setups with ProRes. Like it's good enough. Like it doesn't
Okay.
matter while you're actually editing.
Right.
So much of program A versus program B, whether it's Premiere, DaVinci Resolve, Vegas, Avid, it's about your workflow and what you're using within it.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people will use DaVinci Resolve because of the much better like color tools and the noise reduction. And so
Sure.
like great, yeah, use DaVinci Resolve because that's more important in your workflow. Someone that's just doing like commercial editing, or like the guy who does our videos,
Hmm.
he is in Premiere, and I feel like it's because there's a lot of tools in Premiere, like all the stuff that Adobe is doing recently with like the stuff we were talking about, the transcribing, the remix, the scene edit detection, all that kind of stuff. It makes the workflow much faster because of features. So I always have a hard time. We rarely show something like that with what we do with the DPX, where here's the Premiere Pro performance and hardware load versus DaVinci Resolve performance and hardware load. We rarely show that because so much of it is not about just straight up performance.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
This,
Plus, then
this,
you get into like, well, I also use After Effects, and that's going to integrate with Premiere Pro.
that's true.
Yeah,
Mm,
so it's
yeah.
complicated.
And that's kind of the advice that they can get from you guys as well, from labs, right? Is like, well, hey, maybe Premiere Pro isn't the right software just from a high level general like
Yes,
workflow.
sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, usually it's more, they tell us what they're doing and we tell them how to make the most out of it.
Okay.
But yeah, there are times, like if this customer was using Premiere Pro, we'd probably tell them like, hey, you might either like want to find a different codec you can be working with that, Premiere Pro handles better, or, just know you're going to have to be using proxies, or, hey, maybe you should take a look at DaVinci Resolve. Yeah, more often our recommendations on like workflow is like, hey, don't be afraid of proxies. Like, yeah, they were terrible to work with before, but they've made a lot of progress. And like, even for normal workflows that don't really have a performance issue, you might even think about doing it anyway because it can
Yeah.
make things even smoother. So,
That's cool. I like this question from Kentucky Ranger on YouTube. He says, "Are there any proprietary codecs out there? I could see
oh, sure.
Adobe making some weird codec that can only be used in their software. Is that anything we
No
run
way.
into?"
Oh, sure. Proprietary codec, ProRes.
Oh, every time you say that, my mind instantly says Apple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Apple. Yeah,
Okay.
Apple owns ProRes. They make it. They license it out to like Adobe and Blackmagic. That's one of the reasons why, for the longest time, we weren't able to export to ProRes through Adobe products.
Oh.
They must have finally decided they were going to pay Apple tax, or not tax, but licensing costs to get
Mhm.
that. We still don't have that in DaVinci Resolve. You can't export to ProRes unless you're on macOS, because I mean, Apple's going to give
Interesting.
licensing to themselves.
That makes sense.
So that's why you have to use like DNX when you're working in DaVinci Resolve, and then you could then open Media Encoder and transcode it to ProRes because now you're using Adobe stuff. But yeah, ProRes is the most widely spread proprietary codec, I would say. There's also like Blackmagic Raw.
Mhm.
That one is interesting because DaVinci Resolve has pretty good support. Premiere Pro, it's still done through a plugin, I'm pretty sure, and I
Mhm.
have heard mixed reports of how well it works.
Yeah.
Pretty much anything raw is going to be proprietary.
So the camera or whatnot you're working
Yeah,
with.
yeah, Red Raw, Cinema DNG. Although DNGs technically are an open format, but I mean Canon puts their own spin on it. ARRI Raw, Blackmagic Raw, ProRes Raw. Most codecs are actually proprietary, and there has to be some sort of licensing costs to it. That might even be true for A64 and HTC. Don't quote me on that. It might. I don't think it's an open format. There might. I'm sure there's got to be licensing costs. Like there's no way there isn't. I don't know.
That's so far. I wouldn't even know who you would even talk to, like who handles those sort of deals, like because
I
it's
have no idea.
like everything, like you were saying, like cell phones and GoPros and stuff. Everybody uses this H.265 stuff, so it's like, is that
Well,
IEEE? It's like who do you talk to license it? It's
yeah.
like
There's got to
HDMI.
be.
You pay
Yeah,
a fee for HDMI, but who is it that's getting the money for that? I wonder.
I think that's one of the reasons why like motherboards, like we're talking about like computer components, like motherboards are expensive because there's a lot of licensing costs that goes into things. Like, hey, you want Thunderbolt? Well, you're going to be paying Intel a lot of licensing costs. That's why AMD boards for the longest time didn't have Thunderbolt. And it's
Mhm.
just recently that I feel like Thunderbolt is becoming important enough on PC that AMD is like, all right, well, we'll pay those licensing costs.
Yeah.
And now we're getting it.
Yeah. So I've been put. This is a new one for me. This HPA Tech Retreat, where
Yeah.
a handful of us are going to. We're going to be at. Um, what is that about? So it's Hollywood Professionals Association or something like that.
Yeah. I didn't realize we were going to talk about this, but yeah, we could talk about
It
this.
just
So
kind of
yeah,
popped
this
into my head,
is
and this seems really interesting. So I wanted to.
yeah. So yeah, we're that's in like 2 weeks. Oh
Mhm.
man. So yeah, at HPA, yeah, the Hollywood Professionals Association. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I don't think they actually like say what it is anywhere. But yeah, we're actually one of the sponsors.
Oh,
Let's see, our sponsors. Yeah, we're down here. All right, we're a
there
silver
we are.
level
Hey, look at
sponsor.
that. Okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting sponsorship because I don't think we're actually doing anything at the event. I think we've just basically given them money and hey, we're a sponsor. Normally at these kind of events, we sponsor, and then there is like um, like a demo area that we could
Mhm.
like take systems and give demos out. But this time we decided like, no, we're just gonna go. We're just gonna network and talk to people. It looks like it's a pretty good show, but a lot of times we don't fully commit to an event until we've gone to it at least once.
Sure.
But yeah, myself, Eric, and Jared are all going out.
Uh,
It's going to be in Palm Springs, so I'm sorry. I got to go down to Palm Springs for a couple of days, here.
oh, darn. That's just
My flight
terrible.
might get delayed. I'll have to spend an extra week. I'm not
Ugh.
sure. Yeah.
What is it?
Uh,
What is it about this particular? It says a retreat, which sounds a lot more fun than like a conference or a
Yeah, I think it's
convention.
more a conference because it's most of the day is it's kind of interesting what they do. So at breakfast, every table is like a round table discussion. So like every table has different topics, which I'm looking
Oh,
forward to that. Problem is that the
okay.
breakfast is at 7:30 every morning, and there's
Oh,
parties every night before. But
rough.
and then like the whole day is a whole bunch of sessions. Like a lot of them are pretty short, like 30-minute, like kind of like power sessions. So it's going to be really
Wow.
interesting to hear because I mean we go to NAB, we go to
Hmm.
Adobe Max, but a lot of those shows are they're very wide in who they're targeting. Especially like
Sure.
Adobe Max targets a lot of like students, people learning, just getting into things. A lot of tips and tricks and beginners and intro courses.
Right.
NAB is a little more spread between veterans and new users. HPA though, like it's Hollywood, so I'm expecting we're going to go there. We're not going to hear anything about H.264 and HEVC. If we
Cool.
hear anything about codecs, it's going to be ARIA raw and Red and Blackmagic raw and that kind of stuff.
Oh, that'll be
Um,
good.
yeah, so it's going to be really good because I mean we've been more and more over the years climbing the stack of how high level, and I feel like now we've got a great spread, but
Mhm.
there's always more to learn. And as an event like HPA seems like it's going to be hyper focused on the top end, which is great because then at lunches and dinners and breakfasts we can pick the brains of like what are you doing, what are your headaches, why
Yeah.
are you doing it that way? Because I'm curious how many things that we're going to hear is I'll ask, why are you doing it that way? And the answer is going to be, well, we've always done it that way.
Ah,
I do kind of feel like larger places have a harder time adapting to new things,
oh,
but
sure. I mean,
we'll see.
like it's expensive. Like you were saying,
Hmm.
even just showing the at that Adobe update looks like they're using old hardware, not old, but in terms of how fast technology changes, of one generation can make a 20% difference in your output.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it can be tough, I imagine, to make changes. So
Yeah.
it'll be
Well,
neat.
in some things, I am also going to be curious to see how much of this. I'm pretty sure most of this is like cinema side, not like
Oh,
VFX, because VFX, I feel like, man, they adopt new stuff constantly because they have to.
sure.
Like, hey, you want to do, these crazy, Marvel movies and stuff, you've got to be using, like, you're inventing technology in order to do it. Whereas on the cinema and film, it's more, no, we're going to shoot this in, ProRes Quad 4 like we always have because we
Mhm.
know it works. We know how it's going to behave. Everything we know. And, like, especially if it's going to be, like, TV, like, man,
Right.
you don't need crazy anything for TV. Like TV's gonna be broadcast, 1080p most of the time, or even like streaming services.
Yeah.
Like it's not gonna be
Well,
anything crazy.
I mean,
Although it is
UHD is
changing.
now getting more and more, or 4K and
Hmm.
stuff is pretty common these days. So yeah, I'm
And
curious
and
to
there's the whole HDR stuff too is now starting to come.
right.
So it is starting. It's changing, but it's not as aggressive as like the VFX industries.
I wonder. I wonder how much virtual production will be a topic at HPA.
It is. It is. That's actually one of the major topics.
I imagine so.
Is virtual production.
Because
Yeah.
man, that is I'm constant. It's so cool. I see everything from like garage status, DIY stuff, green screens behind, just hanging behind somebody, all the way up to these massive volumes with LED walls and stuff. And and just recently, one of our clients, Gabby Feeding Wolves, just posted this thing. This is more metahuman stuff and motion capture, but it's like she did this split down where it's like her face and then the metahuman, and it's synced like super. It's perfect. And it's
All of that stuff is amazing.
you're not gonna be able to tell the
And
difference. It's this close, man. And is that tree real? Is that outfit like that person? Like that's not a joke. Like so cool.
yeah, it's that's why I'm curious to see where these discussions are going to go in this HVA thing, because it's even more than like using an LED wall, like in the Mandalorian and stuff, and how
Mhm.
that's becoming more common. It's all the previs stuff.
Sure.
Okay, we have to. Like a lot of the big Hollywood films now, they basically have 2 or 3 versions of the movie, and you just never see the initial ones because it's like they made it an Unreal Engine, and it's
Right.
basically a game, and that's how they figure out all their camera framing and pacing and all this kind of stuff, so that when they're actually on set, with these Hollywood actors that cost millions of dollars a day, they can get everything perfect, and they never have any problems with like where's the camera gonna go, how are we gonna pan or whatever, and that's all figured out ahead of time so that they can maximize their time with these actors
Yeah.
because it's expensive.
Oh yeah.
Doing
Yeah.
doing film is expensive.
Oh, for sure. And that's something too. Is that still is real film still a thing? I know I'm sure there's some directors out there that do it, but it's all pretty much all digital nowadays, right? Hard drives and stuff.
Oh, you mean like actual film?
Yeah, the
Oh
actual like
no, yeah, I'm
recording
sure
part is all
everything is
digital.
digital.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
think
yeah,
so.
yeah. It's all. Yeah, it's
'Cause,
it's
man,
it's all digital.
yeah, I would think so. Or yeah, that's
Yeah.
I'm excited. This I feel like this year is going to be really good. The shows that we're going to, the people that we're looking to talk to, and even just the people who are coming to us, potential customers and stuff. We're starting to get into a time and era where there's just so much power in the hands of so many different people, and it's super cool. I'm really excited.
Yeah, film. The whole film industry it's already been moving to being less real. Well, I don't know what the right way to say it. It's fake because I mean, even like some of the Avengers movies recently, you might see this big old 10-minute scene or whatever, and the only thing real in it is their heads. Like
Right?
everything else was digitally created afterwards, and it's so good that you don't even notice it. And I mean, that's like okay, they have giant budgets,
Yes.
yes, so they can do a lot, but a lot of that technology is starting to trickle down to me and you. Like if I wanted to take the time to learn how to do it, like yeah, I could set up metahuman stuff and do face replacements, like cloth sims and stuff. Like Houdini is becoming more home people are starting to use even like applications like Houdini, and like Unreal like has completely blown up what people are able to do, and you can get pretty darn good pretty quickly, and then it's that last 10% that is what sets like these giant Hollywood blockbusters apart from someone just making something in the garage.
Yeah.
And depending on what you're going for, depending on what you're going for, that might be good enough. Like it's all about cost versus reward. And
Mm-hmm.
so like we're doing a lot of work with Corridor Digital. Like we've been working with them
Right.
for years,
Right.
and seeing them start to move into Unreal and virtual production and that kind of stuff. Like, it's really cool to see. And the kind of things that could have taken them like weeks to do before, I feel like now pretty soon they're going to be able to do like, oh yeah, that's a day.
Yeah.
Like,
Look at the difference. I know Sam, I think it was like 2 years ago, took a lot of time to he made like a whole film inside of Unreal, and
oh, it was terrible.
That's the
it
first
was
try.
it was so
But yeah,
janky. No, it did its job.
compared to like what they're doing now with like Son of a Dungeon and stuff, it's wow, it's super
Yeah,
cool.
well, and because more and more people started doing it, and it went from everyone is having to reinvent the wheel to like, hey, now there's tutorials and guides, and Unreal themselves have put out tools to help aid in these kind of things, and now there's like there's plugins and all this other kind of jazz, and the more people do something like that, the better it's going to get, which just makes more people do it, which is going to
Yeah.
make it even better, and yeah, it's a really exciting time right now to be working with these people in the VFX film content creation kind of space. Even down, even outside of film, I'm always amazed at how much like Photoshop can do now.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah.
Photoshop is insane with what it can do. It makes making all those memes I share on Slack or work Slack takes me minutes now instead of the hours I was spending a few years ago. Don't tell
Not
me.
on the clock, I imagine, right?
Oh no, 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 no. Of course not. I consider it training actually.
Yeah.
So.
No, yeah, you're not joking. Especially, I remember the last time we were at Adobe Max, some of the stuff that they were showing off with like the iPad Pro,
Mm.
and what you're able to do there, like hundreds of layers on a tablet, things like that are just
And
it's
all the AI stuff. Like
oh
AI things are
sure.
not just in Premiere Pro and After Effects. Even simple things is like automatic selection of like subjects. Like, man, it's good. Like, it's
Hmm.
better than I could than I could cut out myself manually because I'm terrible at it. And I don't have like a tablet. I just have a mouse.
Yeah,
But it's better than what I could do, and it's always easier to get something to start and then clean it up afterwards. And
right.
a lot of that kind of stuff I feel is what it does. It gets you to a starting point that is well beyond where you would start normally, and
Hmm.
so that's just time saver. Or it's okay if you've got an hour, either you can fill that hour making it even better, or you can like, all right, I'm done in 5 minutes, and then play around with different things, try different lighting, try different colors, make different revisions and see what works.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And I like this comment from Kentucky Ranger. They say, "Remember the film Looker?" Which I don't recognize the film, but I can see in the future storing stars and using their stored file instead of the actual actor. That's
Oh,
that.
we're already doing that.
Yeah, that's something we've touched on other streams before. Is like some of the ethical implications, but yeah, like even de-aging real actors or adding them in later, like Tarkin in one of the more recent or Leia, right? She had passed and they de-aged and she was completely fake. Or Luke Skywalker, young Luke Skywalker, that kind of a thing. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, they did that with some of the Fast and the Furious movie.
Oh yeah,
They did the whole face. That one was less because it was, I think they got his brother or
yeah.
something like that, so they didn't have to do as much because it was already pretty close, blood relation and everything.
And way more of that film was not actually Paul Walker than I thought.
Mm.
Like I thought it was
Yeah,
just
it's
mostly
crazy.
like that very end scene and stuff, but it's more like 60 to 70% of the actual filming scenes, like he wasn't even there.
Yeah,
And
because the crazy thing is, like, you don't need a 3D model of a person. You can make that, especially an actor that's been in a lot of films. You just take every single film that they were in and you throw it into a machine learning algorithm, and it figures it out on its own. And so the more popular the actor, the easier it is to do.
right.
And so it just does it. But yeah, totally, I could see, if I don't know, Samuel L. Jackson wants to like be able to keep money around for his kids or whatever. Yeah, get like really detailed photo scans of himself in different facial expressions and whatever, and then license it. Yeah, sure.
That's cool.
But
Yeah. Murder mystery from the 70s, so close to what's going on now. Okay. Yeah, let's check it out. That's cool. Yeah. Oh man. It
but yeah,
is.
the scary thing is how easy it is to do some of that stuff though. Like we were talking
Yeah.
about Corridor Digital a minute ago, like they did a redo of the of a Luke Skywalker deepfake. I won't say from where, just in case it's spoilers for anyone still. And they did a pretty darn good job.
Yeah.
Not perfect. I mean, any deepfake isn't going to be perfect yet. But oh man, it's so close. So I'm still kind of worried about, well, when's the first time? I mean, we already have seen. I've seen. Thankfully, they're all parody or funny videos of deepfakes of celebrities or politicians, especially. But oh man, when's that first deepfake of
Whoever
celebrity or politician A saying something on camera that wasn't real? But now, how do you prove a negative? No, I didn't say that. I mean, we already have that with audio, cutting audio up. But once there's video, it just adds that much more punch to it.
So. Yeah. Though, and to that point, though, I know at least Adobe has a lot of, or is working on tools to notice those sorts of things. I know they have one for Photoshop. I think that's just freely available. You put a picture into their tool and it'll say, oh yeah, this is what was done. They can tell just from it's already exported and stuff. It's just this is the file, and it can tell oh yeah, this was blurred and that was cut and this and that. So I imagine it's like any other nefarious thing. It's a leapfrog sort of deal.
Yeah,
somebody's going to do something bad. Somebody's going to find a way to prove it, and they're going to find a way to fake it better. And
yeah, if you talk to Dr. Don, which I know you do, but if anyone else does, that's one of his big thing with machine learning things, is because he's deep into machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's basically what does he call it? Adversarial networks, where they just the fake does learning, and then the detection learns from the fake, and then the learning or the deep fake learns from the detection, and they're just constantly going back and back and back and back and forth. And that's I feel like once those things hit critical mass, where no longer we're contributing to it, man, we're never going to be able to tell the difference visually ourselves. You'll see something on TV, you'll have no idea unless it's got a little thing at the bottom saying this is a fake.
That's
I don't know, but it sounds all super scary. But you also think about a couple hundred years ago, before TV and everything, if New York Times printed something in their newspaper saying Roosevelt said this, well, that's basically the same thing, because people are going to take that at face value. So deep fakes are scary, AI stuff is kind of scary, but I don't think it's intrinsically a new thing for humans in society. It's just a new tool, new way, of how things are going, and we don't need to get into how to keep yourself from being faked, but
right. Nah, that's cool. So, what are you? I always like to close out a little bit. What are you excited about for the near future? We'll just talk maybe this year. Anything cool that you're looking forward to?
Well, next week we're doing a webinar.
Oh, that's right.
So if you're interested in Premiere Pro and After Effects, we're doing a webinar for optimizing PC performance in Premiere Pro and After Effects. So everything from there is going to be a section on hardware, but actually a good chunk of it isn't hardware. It's more workflow. Some of the things we're talking about today about hardware decoding and flavors and proxies and all that kind of stuff. So that's going to be a good one next week at 11 a.m. So a little bit before the same time as what this stream is, 2 hours earlier. We've got that. If anyone is going to be around for GDC in March, well, actually, first we have the HBA thing we talked about. That's in a couple of weeks. So if anyone happens to be going to HBA, find us and say hi. But then after that, March we've got GDC. And then in April, we'll be going to NAB, finally in person. It's been, 2 years now?
I think so, yeah.
So if anyone's looking forward to going to NAB, shoot us something on, social media or something, and we'll meet up. So so that's the big things the next 3 months. After that, man, I haven't been. I don't know. I got to get past these 3 months first with all these events and everything. But there is a lot coming. We have on the hardware side, we have Ryzen 7000 is supposed to be coming out sometime. I don't think they gave a firm date at CES. They just said it's coming. And surprise. I'm sure there'll be new Threadripper Pros, new Intel CPUs. At some point, I'm sure we'll get new NVIDIA cards, although who knows? It feels like we're still mid-cycle with the 3000 series, but...
Yeah, because they talked about a 3090 Ti that was supposed to come out, I think, this month.
Yeah, and usually if
so
they're still talking about TI variants, or in the past they did a couple supers or whatever, that
right,
generally still means we've got a little while till the next big ones, but
yeah.
we'll see.
I'm curious. So GDC, that's a Game Developers Conference.
Mhm.
We don't normally. That seems a little out of our purview. What do we?
Kind of.
What is attracting us to that?
GDC, yeah, GDC is just kind of weird right now because it's Game Developer Conference,
Hmm.
but because of how much Unreal is being used for virtual production, that's the main reason I feel like
Oh,
we decided to go and booth and everything
that
this year
makes
is
sense.
because of we do sell a lot of systems for game development, standard game development, but with all this virtual production stuff going on, I wonder if they'll change GDC to be something different. The term I've heard thrown around is like real time 3D. So instead of it's not a game engine, it's a real time 3D renderer or real time 3D
Oh,
engine.
sure, sure.
So we'll see
Yeah,
that if they change their name. I doubt they'll change their name, but it feels like that's really where it's going. It's just like it's a real time 3D engine, and you
yeah.
can use it for games. You can use it for virtual production. You can use it for previs and film. I mean, there's whole films that now are out that were just made in Unreal.
It's so
So
cool. It's really neat.
yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, cool. All right. Thanks, Matt. That does put us a little bit over an hour. So, one last thing, and I think I'll touch on this one. Kentucky Ranger asked, "How do y'all stand on updating to Windows 11 right now?" I'm still on the fence. Uh, I think the general suggestion is don't yet,
I
unless
haven't.
your software your primary software has come out and said, "Yeah, we support and everything's going to be fine." Um, like my
Even
work
then,
laptop, I did, but you're safe for a while. Don't worry about
yeah.
it.
I usually tell people, okay, if you've got a 12th gen Intel CPU because they have got the whole
The
performance and
shredded
efficient
sugar
core, which is
wisdom.
supposed to be better on Windows 11, or if you use like ultra wide monitors, there's really
Oh,
improvements to the Windows snapping that I think could make a big
oh,
difference.
sure.
But other than like that's the two where I say like, yeah, maybe think about it. Otherwise, like, nah,
Yeah.
it's not a big enough change, and we haven't seen any performance gain really, and in some cases, it's a performance hit still. Um, so, yeah. Of
Right on. Well, thanks for joining us today, Matt, and taking time out of your day.
course.
It's always good to get a little update on what's going on and share that with everybody. So right on. Thank you. Yeah. And I always like to thank the audience as well for joining us. We do this every Wednesday at about most Wednesdays, like 99% of the Wednesdays, 1 p.m. Pacific, right here, YouTube, Twitch, and I also broadcast to LinkedIn and Twitter. So mark your calendars for that. Next week, actually, we have Clinton Jones, the former Corridor Digital VFX 3D artist. That's going to be super fun. I'm really excited to talk to Clint about what he's been up to and get a little more understanding of what it is he does and how he does it. So that'll be really fun. Tune in next week. That's the 16th, 1 p.m. Pacific, right here. Mark your calendars. We'll see you all next time. Yeah. Bye.
Yeah.